now be a moment for silent prayer meditation. Thank you. You may be seated. The first item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. Honorable Chief Whip.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I move that the House, notwithstanding Rule 29, which provides for the sequence of proceedings, agrees that for today and for the 10th and the 17th of November 2015, the sequence of proceedings will be reflected on the order paper as agreed to by the program committee. I so move.
I now put the motion. Are there any objections? No objections. Agreed to. The second item on the order paper is also a motion in the name of the Chief Whip. Chief Whip.
Deputy Speaker, I move that the House suspends the following rules for the purpose of scheduling questions to the Deputy President on the 5th of November 2015. A, Rule 110 sub 2B, which provides that questions to the Deputy President may not be scheduled within the same week in which the Deputy President is scheduled to answer questions in the Council. And B, Rule 1106, which provides inter alia that questions to the Deputy President must be submitted before 12 on the Monday, 9 days before the question day on which they are to be answered. Further suspends Rule 110 sub 1, which provides that questions to the Deputy President must be scheduled for the question day once every second week for the purpose of scheduling questions to the Deputy President on the 12th of November 2015. I so move.
I now put the motion. Are there any objections? No objections. Agreed to. The Secretary will read the first order.
Deputy Speaker, may I have your attention, please?
Yes, sir.
The rules of this House forbids the continuation of the National Assembly, the plenary of the National Assembly, whilst other portfolio committees are in session. There are various portfolio committees that are in session, and that is forbidden in terms of the rules of this House. I want you to rule on the absence of other members, on the basis of that attending portfolio committee meetings.
Which rule is that, sir? Which rule is that?
Deputy Speaker, the assumption is that you are the presiding officer. You should be knowing such rules.
I have served in this House for 20 years. I'm not aware of that. I will ask for consultation on that. Yeah. Honorable Singh.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Notwithstanding whether there is a rule or not on that particular matter, there was an understanding at the Programming Committee on Thursday that all committees would suspend their business by 11 o'clock so that members could attend the House. Now, if that is not happening, I think we've got to refer that to the chair of committees to find out exactly why that is not happening. And I see honorable members on that side of the House nodding their heads in agreement. Thank you.
Yes, honorable members, if there having been an agreement in the programming committee that's explicit and explains why that should happen. So we assume that if they are not here, they are on their way here. Otherwise, they will be notified to the contrary. Honorable members, the Secretary will read the first order of the day.
Consideration of budgetary review and recommendation report of Portfolio Committee on Labor.
I now recognize the Chief Whip. Chief Whip.
Excuse me. I move that the report be adopted.
Are there any objections? No objections, agreed to.
We'd like to make a declaration, Deputy Speaker, as FF, because we reject on this report.
Okay, let's, we'll now allow for up to 2 minutes, one member each political party wishing to make declarations to do so. Who would like to start? Honorable member.
Thank you, Speaker. I must just say the DA does support this report because all of our concerns have been included in the report, and so I think most parties agree to this report because our concerns have been addressed. But there are just 3 things I want to mention about the department in this matter. The compensation fund, number 1, is in complete collapse. I got an email just this morning saying, "Dear Mr. Mafu," that's the person in the department, "my nightmare continues. Dineo from the President's office has now called me to try and resolve this matter." The President's office now is to deal with individual people who have compensation complaints. It is in meltdown and it must be sorted out. Secondly, the unemployment figures continue, over 8 million people unemployed, and the department was only able to place 2% of those people who came to them and reported for unemployment that they are work seekers. We cannot have only 2% being placed in jobs. That is a failure. We've got to create jobs in South Africa. And then there are several other administrative things in the department which we're highly concerned about. So these things need to be dealt with, but we do support the report because our concerns are noted in the report. The final one is just in terms of visas. The Department of Labour is only processing 53% of corporate visas and just over 60% of individual visas that people are applying for. Why are they not just doing their job and processing those visas? So we need to deal with a lot of these things. Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Speaker,
you, Honourable
Deputy
Member.
Speaker.
Honourable Member, EFF.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. EFF reject the adoption of budget review and recommendation report tabled before the House. Since 2010, the Department of Labour was told consistently and repeatedly by National Treasury, Portfolio Committee and other sectors that they have high staff turnover. You are taking too long to fill inspectors' positions. There are no cars for inspectors in the provinces, and as a result, Cabinet approved reduction of the department's budget by more than 400 million. For the department that has total budget of just over 2 billion, this must send a clear signal of crisis. What is alarming about the state of the department, something that can only be described as crisis without exaggerating, is that bridges, building and mines continue to collapse during construction and work because of poor working conditions, events that could have been prevented if there was a functional Department of Labour with fully trained inspectors who have cars and other equipment to do their work. It is no surprise that fight against labour brokers is now left in the hands of the students, fighting for the better conditions of the employees within the institutions, and outsourcing and decent salaries, why the department is quiet. If not all, most entities in particular Unemployment Insurance Fund and the CCMA are by and large failing our people and in an unspeakable way. When you need UIF the most in hard times, it takes more than 6 months to make first payment.
Honourable Member, your time has expired.
Thank you.
Honourable Ngango.
Honorable Chairperson, Deputy Speaker, the IFP supports the report, but in doing so, we want to say that through its mandated regulation of the labor market by policy and programs, the Department of Labor aims to create decent employment, the promotion of labor standards and fundamental workplace rights, sound labor relations, and the elimination of inequality and discrimination in the workplace, to name a few. Of overriding importance is its alignment with the aims and objectives of the National Development Plan, as its successes will largely influence the overall success of the NDP, where all will have access to jobs and services. In this respect, we want to see full alignment of the budget expenditure with programs as articulated in the NDP. A department cannot function without core committed personnel. Institutional capacity still requires strengthening, especially in terms of the inspectorate. Material underspending of budget allocation remains a serious concern. A 5% of budget underspent is simply unacceptable. If this was principally due to a cost error on the side of public works, it should be fully investigated so as not to occur again in future. I thank you.
Honorable Member, Professor Kubisa.
The National Freedom Party is in agreement with the recommendations made by the Portfolio Committee on Labor and urges the department to speedily implement these recommendations for the benefit of workers in our country. The Department of Labor has a very important function to ensure that a conducive environment is created in which labor relations in South Africa can flourish. Unfortunately, the high level of labor disputes and disruptions, which has become a hallmark of our labor relations in South Africa, is testimony to the failure of the Department of Labor in executing its mandate. When you look at the results of the overview of service delivery performance of the labor contained in the report, it's obvious that the 42% per strategic goals of the planned indicators is true reflection of the department's monumental failure. Of particular concern is the low achievement rate of 29% of the planned indicators for labor policy and industrial relations program. Such a dismal failure has serious consequences for labor policy, is the engine that drives labor relations, and neglecting this crucial mandate is bound to lead to uncertainty and upheaval, as we're accustomed to by now. The NFP believes that the failure of the Department of Labor to pay sufficient attention to the development labor policy is detrimental to the right of workers in South Africa and is a source of great concern to us. Having said that, we welcome the report.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chairperson of the committee. Sorry, ma'am. Honorable Madisha. No,
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Although COPE will support the agreed to a program, we believe that a number of things need to be looked into and agreed upon. First, the issue of the empirical evidence that the unemployment rate, as we usually hear, is around 25%, 29%, etc. That is not, has not been, found. In actual fact, unemployment rate in South Africa goes beyond 40%. The people who are working in South Africa, most of them are actually non-South Africans. 4 out of 10 will be South Africans, and the majority really are emphasized will be people from outside of the borders of our country. But even those people, what happens? Who are working, who are South Africans? They are not getting a living wage, and that's a major problem that we are faced with. And that is yet another issue that we need to look at. I'm saying a living wage. If you, for instance, move around the restaurants, even here at Parliament, the people who are working here, they are actually not paid. They are getting peanuts, of course. Some of them are actually given tips so that they then can be able to survive. No salary, but they have tips
Honorable
that they are
Madisha, your
given.
time has
Now, that's a
expired.
major problem, and I hope those of us who
Your
own
time has expired.
institutions such as mines, Deputy President, and others will be able to look into that. Thank you.
Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It would have been good if the honorable member who has just left the podium from COPE, if he was attending the meetings and raised the issues that we're hearing as the committee for the first time here. I think he must direct all the issues that he wants the committee to address to the committee, not here. It is also strange for the committee, for honorable member from the EFF, because all the issues that is raising here are issues that we have raised and discussed with the department, and we have asked collectively for the way forward, and they are in that process. Thank you very much for IFP and NFP for their positive support, despite the fact that they are not always in the committee.
On a point of order, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Take it. Honorable member, please take your seat.
Honorable Speaker, we can't be told by members where to raise issues, whether here or in the taxi rank or elsewhere. We'll raise issues where we want. Whether we want to raise them in the plenary or in the committee, it's our decision. So the honorable member must withdraw the patronizing remarks that we should have raised them elsewhere as opposed to here. This is Parliament, we've got the right to raise whatever issue we want. So we decided to raise those issues here, and there is nothing she can do about it. And it's our right. So deal with the arguments, don't tell us where to raise the issues. What are those issues? Can you deal with them?
Honorable member, proceed. Proceed.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The Portfolio Committee on Labour has considered the performance and submission to the National Treasury for the medium-term period of the Department of Labour. As such, the committee has adopted the budgetary review and recommendation report. The committee notes with serious concern the underspending by some programs which negatively impacts on service delivery. Furthermore, the committee noted underperformance of the inspection and enforcement service program as a result of insufficient financial and human resources. However, today we are happy to hear that Treasury has made budget adjustments and that additional funds of 8.36 million will go to inspectorate services. We also note with concern the challenges faced by the supported employment enterprises, formerly known as sheltered employment
Honorable
factories.
member, your time has expired.
I thank you.
Honorable members, I now put the question again, and are there any objections to the report being adopted?
Yes, Deputy Speaker, and please note the objection of the EFF.
We will note the objections of the EFF, so the report is therefore agreed to. Thank you. The Secretary will read the second order.
Consideration of budgetary review and recommendation report of Portfolio Committee on Economic Development.
I now recognize the Chief Whip.
Thanks, Honorable Deputy Speaker. I move that the report be adopted.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any
Chairperson.
objections?
Chairperson, the DA would like to make a declaration, please. Thank you.
Declarations are 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the DA supports the BRR report of the Economic Development Department. This is because technically the department is well run, has met its KPIs, spent its budget, and has received an unqualified audit with fewer findings than in the previous years. However, we would like to raise some concerns. The department claims that jobs have grown by 405,000 over the period under review, but we would like to point out that the majority of this job growth actually took place in the public sector and is completely unsustainable going forward, as Minister Neni told us in his medium-term budget. In fact, unless the public sector wage bill falls, this country faces a very, very real prospect of a credit downgrade. Secondly, the broader measure of whether this department has been successful in increasing economic development in this country it really has been shown to have failed miserably if we look at our economic growth rate recently downgraded to 1.5%, and particularly high levels of unemployment that don't seem to move at the moment. It is a contention of the DA that this department should be part of a single super finance and economic ministry encompassing DTI, economic development, and small business. And it is felt that the 700,000 Rand it costs to run this department could be better deployed on the higher education budget that will actually provide tangible opportunities to young people wishing to enter the job market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Matt.
Deputy Speaker, the economic freedom fighters reject the adoption of the budget review and recommendation. These are the following reasons. We believe that this department still has no clear identity within the framework of the developmental goals of the state. We believe that it still finds itself handing over tasks that are fairly spread around 3 of its sister departments. And the most important part is that in year 2008, there was 21.5% unemployment in South Africa. And as we stand today, there is 25.5% unemployment in South Africa, which means increasingly the country is shedding jobs, and there is no state intervention, and there is no state-driven manner in which to sustain the economy of our country. We have seen also the rise of the finance development institution not being able to finance the small and medium-sized enterprises, in particular to revive the township economies, as it were. We have also been told that the competition commissions, in particular the overall competition authorities, still lack the powers to make sure that a lot that happened in the competition arena is fair and it's accessible and it's make business sense to the small and medium players. What we need to define a developmental state is a state that is not relying on private sector to make jobs, but it is a state that is able to define itself inclusively within that, and it's able to have developmental goals to jack up the economy and make sure that it safeguards the interest of its population and the citizens.
Member, your time
You cannot
is
blame
expired.
the unemployment of citizens on private sector. You have a role as the state. Thank you.
Honourable Nkomo.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. The IFP would like to state on record that we support this report. The department and minister must be congratulated on obtaining an unqualified audit opinion for the 4th consecutive time, as well as for the fact that there were no material misstatements in the financial statements that were submitted for auditing in 2014-2015. However, of notable internal concern are the following. The department's vacancy rate, which increased from 22.06% to 26.2% in the current year under review. Allowance must be made for unfunded posts, but this percentage is still too high and must be addressed by human resources. The second part is the appointment of employees without following proper verification processes as regard to qualifications, which was again noted by the Auditor General is still occurring. Management must be held accountable for non-compliance with such legislation. This must not occur going forthwith. The high rate of staff turnover must also be investigated as it is in most instances evident of a department that is not being managed properly. In terms of the department's performance, the department must be congratulated on the steps it is taking to promote the use of sustainable and renewable forms of energy, which not only create employment but also alleviate pressure on the national energy grid. The creation of employment generally in the country, although greater impetus must be placed on the creation of long-term employment. The issue of youth health empowerment and entrepreneurial skills must also be upheld. In conclusion, the department has performed well in meeting its goal, and we hope to see this trend continue into the year 2016. The IFP will support the report. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Congress of the People urges Parliament and all portfolio committees to extend the scope of the budget review. According to a brilliant article by Jabulani Sikakani in the Business Times on the 1st of November, New Zealand pioneered a concept called, and I quote, whole of government accounts. This approach allows the government to report annually on the total resources of government, including borrowed funds, each year, and how it uses these to improve the standard of living of its citizens. The Congress of the People strongly recommend our Parliament adding that innovation as a further measure. Then we will be able to see the picture in its departmental parts, as we are now doing, but very importantly also as a whole. Meanwhile, what does this department have to do between now and budget time? Here's the list. Strengthen internal auditing, increase job creation substantially, look urgently at the European Commission's Erasmus programs to help our 18 to 25-year-olds to acquire marketable skills and become either self-employed or employable. Commit fully and eagerly to renewable energy, both to meet the country's electricity challenges and the effects of climate change. Consolidate the CSI contributions. Meet urgently with all role players in the ailing local steel industry in a major Ndaba to chart the way forward and to increase downstream and sidestream enterprises. Improve infrastructure and take all steps possible to curb cable and metal theft using the Criminal Matters Amendment Bill of 2015. Coordinate and measure national, provincial and municipal economic development programs. We hope to see considerable progress in the coming 6 months. COPE support the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Yes, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The report tabled indicates that Department of Economic Development had performed well during the past year, and the NFP welcomes this finding. Economic development is at the heart of government's effort to create decent work through meaningful economic transformation and inclusive growth, and it should be a concern of each one of us that this department should function very well. Despite the rose-colored picture created by the various reports on which the Portfolio Committee on Economic Development had relied, statistics give us a different picture. We are still operating under the constraints of a slowdown in global economy, uncertainty in our electricity supply, and a labor market that is unsettled due to conflict. Our unemployment figures of 25.2% remain a cause for great concern, and particularly so when we talk of youth unemployment. Despite the Youth Accord and various other interventions by the state, youth unemployment remains unacceptably high, and this seems to be no clear direction from the Department of Economic Development to address this ticking time bomb we have on our hands. The NFP urges the department to make every possible effort to come up with innovative ways to ensure that decent and sustainable employment opportunities are created to employ our youth before we have the situation arising where the youth take to the streets and make the country ungovernable in protest against high unemployment within their ranks. In conclusion, the NFP accepts the Portfolio Committee BRRR report on economic development and support the recommendations made therein. I thank you.
Yes, the ANC supports the report, particularly in regard to the department's initiatives aimed at coordinating for job creation. Furthermore, the committee appreciated the fact that the department obtained an unqualified audit report for the 5th consecutive years. Yet, the department overachieved in the period covered, more than meeting all its KPI targets. I wish to quote from the BRR. Thanks.
Honorable members, I put the question again. The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections?
Yes, EFF objects.
Okay. We'll note the objection of the EFF. The report is therefore agreed to. The Secretary will read the third order.
Consideration of budgetary review and recommendation report of Portfolio Committee on International Relations and Cooperation.
Chief Whips?
I move that the report be adopted.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Any objections?
Deputy Speaker, Deputy Speaker,
objections
the DA
noted.
would like to make a declaration. Thank
The
you.
DA would like to declare. Proceed.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. The Democratic Alliance would like to support the recommendations precisely because our concerns and inputs has been considered, and I think the committee was frank and robust in its report. However, we would like to place on records our concerns. We are quite concerned about the fact that the department has received qualified audit opinion for 2 consecutive financial years, especially on serial issues of supply chain management, ICT, asset management, consequence management, and non-compliance with rules and legislation. We believe that 3 critical issues that should be addressed are: the first one is the slow response by management in addressing the root cause of poor audit outcomes. The second is the key officials that lack appropriate competencies. And the third one is the lack of consequences for poor performance and transgressions. And this is what the Auditor General has also indicated. Finally, it is an issue of concern that the department lacks leadership, which lacks oversight responsibility, action plans, policies and procedures, and effective leadership culture. This is quite unacceptable and indictment on senior management. We would want to see the irregular expenditure of 102 million being reversed that has been incurred because of contravention of key legislation and prescribed processes not being followed. And finally, the unauthorized expenditure of 215 million. We believe that if those issues are quite concerned, then the department will be on a positive trajectory. In conclusion, the issue of foreign currency fluctuations, we believe that the department, together with Treasury, should make adequate process and programs to ensure that there is proper planning and pipeline planning so that this issue does not always recur, because
Your
this
time has
department
expired,
operates
honourable member.
under that environment. The DA support the report. I thank you.
Yes. Honourable member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The FF rejects the adoption of the budget review and recommendation reports from the International Relations and Cooperation Portfolio Committee. If the ANC want to use every process in Parliament, including those that are meant to assess the performance of government department and its incompetent ministers objectively so, as ANC rallies and push propaganda through this report, the EFF will not be part of it. We don't see why we must be giving this department any money because they have nothing to show for it. Joint African Union and United Nations Economic Commission high-level panel reports illicit financial flows from Africa has been released from more than a year now, and this department has not said a word to indicate their concern. This department is supposed to guide South Africa capital when it conducts its business in Africa, but it has failed to do so. Instead, South Africa companies continue to erode tax base of African countries when the money they can be used to build schools, hospital, and fight wars against terrorism. Companies like MTN and Standard Bank go out and treat African countries as their own backyard, operate with total disregard of domestic legislations, and when they are caught and fined, this department keeps quiet like a church mouse. When they are caught with their pants down, this department cannot even comment on it, instead of commending the government of Nigeria for such progressive steps to deal with lawlessness by MTN. The EFF rejects the adoption of the budget review. Or let me repeat it so you can hear. The economic freedom fighters, government in waiting, rejects the adoption of the budget review and recommendation report because it is clearly failing to recognize that this department is wasting money. We reject.
Honorable Mango. Please look at your watch, you guys.
Deputy Speaker, the IFP actually supports this the report. But in doing so, we would like to say that in order to ensure that South Africa's international policy objectives are met, it is essential departmental strategic objectives are fully implemented and aligned with the priorities in the National Development Plan. With our diplomatic missions now totaling 126 in 109 countries throughout the world, we need to ensure that the department functions at optimal level, as well as ensure that we are getting value for money through these missions in terms of spin-off trade benefits with the countries in which the missions are situated. Whilst we acknowledge that foreign exchange volatility makes it difficult to budget correctly, allowance can and must be factored in for such fluctuations. In this regard, departmental net underspending cannot be viewed in too harsh a light, although a qualified audit opinion from the Auditor General must be addressed and steps taken to turn this around in 2016. In this regard, the need for dedicated training programs for the officers responsible for financial statements, procurement, supply chain management, and asset management must be implemented urgently, as developing such departmental standards of uniformity will greatly assist with administrative compliance. Replacement of outdated ICT infrastructure is important, as delays caused through technical and logistical inadequacy can lend themselves to administrative delays, and this must also be looked at. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The long fight for the NA to have a bigger say in budget making was worth the trouble. Because of that change, the committee can urge the department to implement its recommendations and request a report from the Minister within 3 months. Here's what the committee wants: condonation from SCOPA on unauthorized protocol service costs incurred during the state funeral of former President Mandela, remedial action regarding the Auditor General's concern regarding supply chain, ICT and asset management, including heritage assets in South Africa and missions abroad. Appropriate and adequate training for all officials in charge of finance. The operationalization of SATPA in order to address structural and operational challenges facing the ARF. Quarterly meetings between the committee and the Internal Audit Committee to track progress on financial management, awareness-raising sessions with supervisors and employees on both the performance management and development systems and its processes, as well as on disciplinary actions that need to be implemented. Empowering the Office of the Chief Operations Officer to address serially occurring operational failures affecting the department. meeting equity targets in respect of gender, as well as in respect of people with disabilities. The Congress of the People also supports the view that the department should focus on developing Southern Africa and Africa as trade and investment zones. Our foreign policy must indeed be aligned to the National Development Plan. We need value for money, expansion of real democracy, cessation of wars and conflict, and enhanced trade from international relations. The Congress of the People will support the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Chairperson.
Thank you, Chairperson. The ANC supports the budgetary review recommendations report of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation because through this department, South Africa's position has become a respected member of the international community with a dynamic and independent foreign policy that speaks to the country's domestic priorities. At the time of reporting, as members are aware, South Africa's diplomatic footprint has grown from 34 countries in 1994 to 126 diplomatic missions by 2014 and 15, which is situated in 104 countries. But most importantly, the overall service delivery performance of the department is commendable because the department has to carry out its mandate within an unpredictable, at times turbulent external environment to advance South Africa's national priorities. Yes, indeed, honourable members, the Auditor General's audit findings for 2014 and 15 have expressed a qualified audit opinion with regard to the department's performance on asset management, ICT issues, etc., etc. The department, however, most importantly, also facilitated an historic joint sitting of Parliament debate on African Agenda 2063, a requirement that was expected by the AU of all its member states' parliament. The major highlights of the department activities were that during the reporting period, South Africa assumed the chairship of the group of 77 plus China. And lastly, South Africa continued to play an important role in the pursuit of regional peace and stability and regional integration to bolster socio-economic development. A key milestone was its unanimous election as the chair of the SADC organ on politics, defense, and security. In this regard, the department conducted successful election observer missions in Malawi, Mozambique, Botswana, Namibia, Mauritius, Zambia, and Lesotho. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable members, the question again, and in fact, the motion is that the report be adopted. Is there any objections?
Bra, van May, the Economic Freedom Fighters object the report.
Honorable Matthias, don't outsource your responsibility for talking properly in the House. Honorable members, we will note the objections of the EFF. The report is therefore adopted. The Secretary will read the fourth order.
Consideration of budgetary review and recommendation report of Portfolio Committee on Sport and Recreation.
Chief Whip.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I move that the report be adopted.
Motion is that the report be
Deputy
adopted.
Speaker. Deputy Speaker.
Are there any objections?
The official opposition would like to make a declaration. Thank you.
The opposition will start declaring. Let's hear the opposition.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the official opposition, we support the report. However, I would like to highlight three critical issues that have not received sufficient report. One is Boxing South Africa. Boxing South Africa continues to fail the most basic test of good governance. Bouts are being sanctioned without proper procedures being followed. Promoters are still not paying purse monies on time, and despite the presence of a new board, there still hasn't been a full-time CEO appointed. And secondly, we'd like to highlight the issue of grants to provincial governments and federations. We believe that the allocation of grants to sports federations is disproportionate to their needs. Some of the biggest sports federations, such as cricket, rugby, and football, are more commercially self-sufficient, yet the poorest federations, such as basketball, netball, and hockey, receive very minuscule support from the government, and we believe that one of the most effective ways of enhancing transformation in sport is ensuring that there's genuine support to the smaller sports federations. And lastly, is that the Cold War between the Sports and Recreation Department and Basic Education is harming sport in schools. As a result, more than half of the schools in the country are not playing any form of sport simply because there isn't sufficient policy coordination and implementation between the two departments. And we hope that going forward, that will receive their attention. Thanks, Speaker.
Honourable members.
Deputy Speaker, EFF is rejecting this report. Amongst the ideal attributes of sports in this country are accessibility and equitability. The reality is that sports is neither accessible nor equitable in South Africa, and access to quality sports is determined by race or wealth. In 21 years after this democracy, we still have national rugby team which goes to World Cup with only 5% of black players in their squad. This department put aside only 0.8% of its budget for sports infrastructure development. We cannot compete with other countries in Africa and the world if we fail to build quality sports infrastructures in our townships, rural villages, and poorest of the poor communities. Problem of this department is Minister Mbalula himself, who only knows how to hijack parties, forgetting that he's a minister now, is no more a child. We reject this report.
Honourable member.
Honourable House Chair, the IFP supports this report and we would like to congratulate the department for achieving a clean audit. However, we are concerned about other entities that fall within the department mandate, mostly notably the BSA. Transformation is still a challenge in all sporting codes, excluding athletics. Transformation is still not receiving any real impetus. When this is going to change? Our rural areas remain underserviced with no development, and this is in terms of sporting codes. Boxing South Africa has not fully developed, especially in the township and rural communities that even suffer more than exposure to all these sports. We call for an urgent implementation for school sports and want to see a memorandum of understanding of the Department of Sports and Recreation and Department of Basic Education being implemented. The schools in rural areas and townships still require more major support from the department. These sports facilities where buildings are not maintained, and there is little done by the department of assisting the schools that are interested in sporting activities. Adequately resourcing and equipment. If receiving all this does not arrive on time, this must be rectified. We hear no development on drug-free amendment bill. How far is the implementation of this bill will be? I thank you. This IFP supported.
Thank you. Honourable member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The National Freedom Party is encouraged by the increased performance of the Department of Sport and Recreation on key indicators and commends the department for the improvement. Yet, much more needs to be done. We firmly believe that the department should become actively involved in the creation of sport infrastructure at schools. It is estimated that only 50% of schools are in some way involved in the development of sporting infrastructure, and all indications are there that rural schools are once again sadly neglected in this regard. If we wish to become a nation of champions, we have to make opportunities and facilities available to our school children so that their talents may be discovered and nurtured. The ugly political furor that erupted on the eve of our national rugby team's departure for the World Cup has forcefully brought to the fore the fact that our sporting codes have not transformed yet to the extent that they reflect the diversity and accurate representation of our society. The Department of Sport and Recreation still has a long way to go to correct this imbalance. The NFP also remains concerned about the lack of effective monitoring of funds allocated to sports clubs. The Portfolio Committee is over-reliant on reports which are taken at face value with not enough oversight visits to determine whether these funds are indeed applied for the improvement of sporting and recreation facilities for our citizens. In conclusion, the NFP will accept and support the Portfolio Committee BRRR on sports and recreation. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Sultan.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Transformation of sport, and in particular of our rugby, cannot be overemphasized, and we must end talking on this matter and force action. The fact that the rugby team went out there and we have a single player like Siya Kolisi who never touched the ball, who never played any match, is quite painful to the over 40 million Africans of this country. There is absolutely no transformation taking place in that rugby. We have got a coach who is stiff-necked, who is not interested in transforming rugby, and we've got a president of SA Rugby who keeps on telling us that they are running a business. So when we talk as citizens of this country, he says we're irrelevant. SA Rugby are just running their own private business. And if Parliament doesn't take this, and in particular the ruling party, then they're running away with something. We must stop saying that this is our rugby, because they do not think on those terms. They regard it as a personal property. They're making us totally irrelevant. And we've got to face that as a fact. We remain cold-blooded about it. The country is losing down on one issue where there should be transformation. Rugby has just not moved. The same with cricket, just no movement at all. And we need to take serious steps about that, because all the money that the government is putting in support of sport, it has got to translate to social cohesion. And this is not taking place if government is very, very lax on this issue of transformation. That's what it means, economic transformation. We can sit here in our nice suits, but if there is no transformation taking place on the ground, we're just, playing with time. It's as simple, as all that. We need to transform our rugby. We cannot negotiate any longer. We need, we've done that with CODESA. We need to move very fast and very effectively. We can no longer afford the luxury of just sitting here and accepting things as in the past. All the budget we support, as UTM, but we have got to transform our sport. That is the political will that is needed, from the people in this House. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honourable Member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Department professes to achieve the following: increase access, provide mass participation, advocate transformation, develop talented athletes, supporting high-performance athletes. Now, let's take rugby, for example, fresh in our memories. The South African national rugby team departed for Rugby World Cup under trying circumstances. The nation's support for its national team was divided. The division over transformation issues. The national turmoil surrounding the team has had an impact on the team, as evidenced in its historic loss to Japan. But a study conducted has revealed a theory that the South African rugby is emulating the rest of South African society. That is, concentrating more and more resources on an ever-shrinking elite. That is the problem. The study reveals that over time, players, for example, representing the Springboks, are increasingly coming from elite schools that historically have been associated with the production of Springbok rugby players and less are emerging from non-traditional Springbok producing schools. While teams are slowly becoming more multiracial, it is also becoming more elite, like our South African society. For South Africa to keep on performing to the highest level and to achieve the ideal of non-racialism, state schools have an important role to play. It is evident from the study that government is failing in its responsibility regarding the promotion and transformation of all sports. The solution lies in state schools, inculcating and promoting a culture of sport from an early age. COPE will be supporting this report, but it is now time for the department to compile an audit findings register, implement all the recommendations noted in the report, ensure a partnership with the Department of Education,
Your time
state
has
broadcaster,
expired,
and the
honourable
private
member.
sector. I thank you.
I see.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. As AIC, we support this report. However, the budget that has been allocated to this committee or department is not enough as always. As a parliament, we should recommend to the Minister of Finance for amendment of this budget for this department as per Money Bills Procedure and Related Matters Act number 9 of 2009. Of course, this department is always doing well, having a clean audit, not just an unqualified audit. We therefore need sort of a motivation and encouragement. The SA sport has been operating without any defined sport system for many years. I can now proudly report that this department has developed the National Sport and Recreation Plan. Our department leads in the development and implementation of the United Nations policies related sport for development and peace. It is therefore important to bring peace and security to the sport and the recreation department. Of course, now if all criminals can be involved in sport, there can be less crime. Also, schools should be encouraged or compelled now to take sport seriously, because that's where the development should start. It seems as if now the schools are not taking sports seriously. As a committee, we do appreciate the transfer of 64% of the budget to provinces. But we have got to see that these monies are being used efficiently and effectively. We are always suspicious of the MIG fund that is always transferred to municipalities. These funds are not used for the meant purpose. This should be investigated and culprits be brought to book. Our community is actually doing well. In the case of boxing, we are trying as a community sport hard to make ends meet. Then we do support this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I must acknowledge the Deputy President. The African National Congress support the report because of the following. The department has received a clean audit consecutively, 2 years consecutively. The international participation of national teams under the same banner, it's an achievement in itself. National sports, national school championships, where we had over 10,000 participants, is an indicator that we are working closely with basic education. The report also addresses weaknesses that have been identified, for instance, around the challenges that are faced by BSA. We are going to ensure that the action plan that has been developed by the department is watched very closely, so that the necessary capacity is employed in BSA. SAIS, it's an organization that is doing well,
but there are issues that has been raised by the Auditor General. We are also saying the action plan to rectify those will be monitored clearly, quite closely. With regards to MIG, Municipal Infrastructure Grant, we are engaging the Treasury, and we are happy that the ANC, African National Congress, has reaffirmed its commitment that 15% of MIG must be set aside for infrastructure development. School sport is taking place. That is why, over 10,000 learners are participating in sport, but we will continue.
Honorable Member, your time has expired.
Thank you very much.
Honorable Members, we ask the question again, and the question is whether the report be adopted. Any objections? No.
The EFF object.
We'll note the objection of the EFF. The report is therefore agreed to. The Secretary will read the fifth order.
Consideration of budgetary review and recommendation report of Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services on Department of Correctional Services and related entities.
Deputy Chief Whip.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move that the report be adopted.
Honorable Members, any declarations?
Yes, Deputy Speaker, the DA would like to make a declaration. Thank you.
So is the EFF.
Can you start with us this time, Honorable? It's not a problem.
Yeah,
just, white people last, black people first for now.
For that reason, we start here. Go ahead, Honorable Member.
Deputy Speaker,
I have made a decision, sir.
it's got nothing to do with race. It's about winning votes. 6%, 22%. It's a simple math, sir.
Go ahead, Honorable Member. Yes, all right.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Honourable members, it is regrettable that while the committee hopes to increase its interaction with all the worthy institutions that fall under the justice vote, it remains an undeniable fact that correctional services, by virtue of being included in this portfolio committee, remain sorely neglected. The interaction with the committee remains minimal, with only one oversight visit by the committee having been undertaken in 2 years. This department serves a vital function within the criminal justice cluster and simply does not get the attention it deserves due to it being joined with the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. The department needs and deserves a separate committee in order for the oversight function to be properly dealt with. The Democratic Alliance notes with approval that a National Commissioner has been permanently appointed and congratulates Mr. Modise on his appointment. Other key appointments have also now been filled, and we look forward to more stability and direction in this department going forward. The department has in fact had its budget reduced, largely due to an inability to fill vacant posts. It is hoped that this reduction will not have a negative effect on the key aspects of rehabilitation and reintegration of the department. The Democratic Alliance supports the BRR report.
Thank you. Honourable Member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The EFF rejects this budgetary report because this department is mandated by the Constitution as part of the criminal justice system to ensure that justice in South Africa is corrective, not punitive. It is a department that is supposed to ensure that offenders get rehabilitated back to society as better individuals. But the reality is that offenders come back to the society from prisons worse off than they were before. Prisons are being the breeding grounds of hardened criminals who come back to haunt our society. This is because the Department of Correctional Services has abdicated its constitutional responsibility to rehabilitate offenders, and in some instances given over this responsibility to private companies such as G4S, who, as in the case of Mangaung Prison, physically abuse prisoners and use them as guinea pigs, testing some dangerous drugs on helpless prisoners. The G4S abuses South African prisoners was first reported in 2013 And up to this day, this department has done nothing to investigate this issue, despite the promises of former minister to ensure privatization of South African prisons will be rooted out. Why does the so-called developmental state privatize even such basic services as correctional services? Former Minister Sbu Ndebele admitted in 2013 that the privatization of prisons was a horrible mistake, that it should never be repeated, but the current minister again gave back the management of Mangaung prison to G4S. The continuation of privatizing prisons milks the very limited resources of this department. Private prisons take about 7% of the department's budget.
Honourable Member.
The OSD to personnel is still owed, and then the department does not use its budget. Thank you.
Honourable Member, it's your turn, sir.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. In terms of the department's first strategic goal, namely that all offenders should be held in safe, secure, and humane custody, we have reports that many of our correctional services centers, and especially those in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, are in a very poor state of repair, both structurally and in terms of basic humane standards of health and hygiene. We hear reports of correctional service centers not having access to basic services such as water, and that because of lack of funding, could not employ professional services to rectify the ailing infrastructure. Inmates were sent out to try and restore the problem. Correctional services employees have still not all been issued with identification cards and badges. This recently resulted in an injured employee not receiving immediate and proper medical care, as it could not be ascertained that he was in fact an employee of the department and have a valid medical aid. Social reintegration programs must be available in all provinces. The recent presidential release of political prisoners, some of whom have been languishing in our jails for nearly 20 years, require assistance to reintegrate into society. Are there adequate social reintegration and employment programs for these people? In terms of administration, there remains a great deal to be desired, and we look forward to the department rolling up its sleeves and getting to work on restoring itself to its former glory and full strategic compliance. The IFP supports the report. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The NFP.
Thank you, Chairperson. The B2R on correctional services, dealing specifically with correctional services and tabled here today, portrays a sad picture of the state department in perpetual crisis. The information tabled by the department has once again been insufficient and incorrect in many ways, making it difficult for the portfolio committee to assess the performance of the department with any relative degree of accuracy. The Auditor General's report similarly highlighted inaccurate and insufficient information as an obstacle to making a true and reflective assessment of the financial state of affairs of the department. The NFP is particularly dismayed at the findings of the Auditor General that, which points serious weaknesses in assessing the incarceration and rehabilitation programs of the department, which are two core aspects of the mandate given to the department. The NFP also firmly supports the recommendation of the Portfolio Committee that all senior level management vacancies be filled as a matter of urgency, of priority, to ensure leadership stability in the department and to overhaul the department organizational structure, which is impeding on the ability of the departments to adequately manage and control its performance program. In conclusion, the NFP reluctantly accepts the Portfolio Committee
we are on correctional services. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Madisha.
Thank you. Once again, the Auditor General observed a stagnation in respect of the audit outcomes for the department, as there was little progress from 2013-2014. This is so disappointing in a climate of dwindling state resources. COPE urges the Portfolio Committee to ensure the following. One, implementation of a comprehensive financial reporting system on all third-party funds to enable preparations for complete and accurate financial statements, resolving how to carry balances forward, correct daily recording of transactions and stringent management of records supporting disclosures in financial statements, stringent daily and monthly reconciliation to ensure the credibility of figures reported in the financial statement. 5, upgrading of current information systems. 6, improving records management at court level to ensure that all amounts disclosed in the financial statements are fully and authentically supported by credible audit evidence. 7, ensuring 100% compliance with doing daily, weekly, monthly reconciliation of cash, bank, etc. Now, with respect to the financial constraints experienced by the Public Protector of South Africa, we believe that urgent attention must be given to enable it to adequately discharge its mandate. COPE agrees with the committee, of course, as well as with the PPSA of the potential erosion of public trust as a result of
Honourable Member, your time is now expired.
the present government to implement the Public Protector's findings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Macheka.
Honourable House Chairperson, Honourable...
Honourable Macheka, will you just take your seat, please? I just want to address a matter. May I request honourable members that once they have used the podium, is to make use of the passage immediately to the left and not to obstruct and use the middle floor and take a seat back. Honourable Madisha, I'm specifically addressing you, honourable member. I say that may you please observe by making use of the passage immediately to the left instead of crossing the floor to the other side when you return to your seat, please. Thank you. Honourable Macheka.
Honourable House Chairperson, Honourable Deputy President and Honourable Members, the African National Congress supports the report with the following observation. Firstly, that we support the request by Legal Aid South Africa for additional funding because they have a heavy load and they have a plan that can reduce the burden of that the department has on funding cases. Secondly, the department, the portfolio committee is calling for the reintroduction of the Traditional Courts Act bill during this term and also supports the introduction of paralegal legislation and advice centers so that justice can be made available to ordinary people. And also the committee feels that the failure to use indigenous languages is denying access to justice by the majority of the people, so we are calling for that. But lastly, House Chairperson, we think that the Department of Correctional Services is not neglected. There are important improvements that are taking place, and we support the new national director in the good work that he is doing. We also believe that the Office of the Public Protector has now a new CEO, CFO.
Honourable
and
Member, your time is now expired.
there are visible improvements that are taking place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Members, I put the question again. Are there any objections to the report being adopted? There are objections.
House Chair, the Economic Freedom Fighters object because I've not been hearing what the member
The
was saying.
objection of the
It was merely
EFF is
out.
noted. Are there any other objections? There's no further objections and the report is thus adopted. The Secretary will read the sixth order.
Consideration of budgetary review and recommendation report of Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services on Department of Justice and Constitutional Development and related entities.
I now recognize the Honourable, the Deputy Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thanks, House Chair. I move that the report be adopted.
The motion is that the report be adopted.
Chairperson, the DA would like an opportunity for declaration. Thank you.
Declaration from the DA. Honourable Breitenbach.
Thank you. The committee oversees the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, Correctional Services, the National Prosecuting Authority, Legal Aid South Africa, the Special Investigating Unit, the South African Human Rights Commission, the Public Protector South Africa, as well as the newly independent Office of the Chief Justice. It's easy to see that all of these institutions perform vital functions in our democracy and all are vital for its success. So it's no easy task to determine which or all should receive support for the request for additional funds. The committee was fortunate to be able to engage with the Office of the Auditor General, whose very practical presentation helped enormously in understanding the various budgetary challenges. A few stand out. Legal Aid South Africa, previously the ugly sister of the group, has experienced a miraculous turnaround under the leadership of Judge Malamba and must be congratulated for an outstanding performance and constitution. An undertaking to try and pay more attention to civil matters is encouraging, and Legal Aid continues to do excellent work in terms of its mandate. The Office of the Chief Justice, while newly independent and still finding its feet, has been innovative and proactive in its approach and is doing very good work in a short space of time. The Democratic Alliance welcomes the recommendation of the committee that there should be more regular interaction with Chapter 9 institutions. Similarly, we welcome the recommendation of additional funding for Legal Aid South Africa to expand its work to include civil matters and also maintenance-related matters. The DA also welcomes the fact that the Office of the Public Protector will receive similar support and receive assistance from the Auditor General to address the challenges arising from an accumulated deficit. The Democratic Alliance supports this BRRR report.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Ndlozi.
Thank you, Chairperson. The EFF rejects this report, and there are two critical things for our declaration in this regard. The first one has to do with the transformation question within the legal fraternity. EFF supports the resolution by the Joburg Bar to force attorneys to brief black advocates. The plight of black lawyers in this country is one of the key demonstrations that the ANC government suffers from slave mentality. The government is well known to brief white lawyers all the time, arguing that it's about experience. Yet in cases related to fields of constitutional and competition law, majority if not all of which involve the state, we continue to see government briefing white lawyers. This is despite the fact that constitutional and competition law are post-1994 fields. Even the Deputy Chief Justice attested that on cases related to these fields, government lawyers are mainly if not all white. This is proof of the crippling psyche of the ANC, suffering from slave mentality seen as well with the cases of the Speaker against the EFF. When we brief black lawyers, the Speaker briefs white lawyers, hoping that because they are white, they will win against us. But our black lawyers have consistently embarrassed the Speaker's white lawyers hands down. It is also a well-known fact that in the Marikana Commission, Deputy President Ramaphosa appeared with a white human shield of white lawyers to protect him against the charge that he had participated in the mass murder of black workers. If you want us to take you seriously, you must have confidence in black people.
House
the tendency
Chairperson,
to always
on a point
brief
of
black.
order.
Honourable Ndlozi, you will take your seat, please. What is the point of order, Honourable Member?
The honorable member is insinuating that the deputy president killed people in Marikana, of which is not true, and he knows it.
Honorable member, I will check the answer in terms of what the honorable member has said.
Chair, you are very wise.
And then I will come back and make a ruling if necessary.
You are very wise.
Continue, honorable member.
Because I've just read about the speaker's cases against us here. If you want us to take you seriously, you must have confidence in black people. The tendency to always brief white lawyers reflects on yourself that you actually do not think you as blacks are competent in your own jobs. If you did, you would believe that black lawyers are also competent. As advocates, Ntsebeza has suggested to you, Minister, would like to repeat, government must immediately put all black advocates on a roster. Use them, because if you do not, then you must tell us, where are we going to get black judges for the transformation of the judiciary? The answer is
Honorable
simple.
member, your
Nowhere.
time has now
The
expired.
slave mentality is not only a reflection of self-hate, it is also deeply short-sighted. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member.
Chair, I had 8 seconds according to this clock.
You went 8 seconds over the time allocated to you, honorable member. Honorable Swart.
Thank you, Chairperson. The ACDP will support this report. I think it's important to note that as far as the briefing patterns are concerned, 76% of the briefs by the government go to black advocates. So it is not true to say that all briefs go to white lawyers. What is also important to note is that one of the main disclaimers here is the third-party funds, and this remains a challenge. In the number of years that I've served on this committee, it has always been a challenge, and so we trust that progress will be made to remove this disclaimer, which is a serious indictment on this department. In this regard, the ACDP welcomes the Justice Administered Funds Bill, which has been tabled and which we believe will go a long way to address the problems faced with the administration of third-party funds. The next issue is the Special Investigating Unit, which is struggling to collect monies due to it from departments. Now, when it does work for departments, it charges a fee. And obviously, when those departments don't pay the Special Investigating Unit, this affects its ability to do its work. We also support the work of the Legal Aid South Africa, which is, again, an example to all departments. And lastly, the issue of the public protector. Whilst we now know that the Supreme Court of Appeal has stated that its remedial actions must be abided by departments, we also understand that further clarity can be obtained by the Constitutional Court in February. But at this stage, there's no reason why departments should not abide by the decisions of the public protector in view of a binding Supreme Court of Appeal decision. The recommendations that we need to look at the timeframes, I think this has impacted all portfolio committees in trying to do its work, and more particularly this portfolio committee with correctional services having been joined to it. It's been very difficult to consider all the departments. However, we believe that we should relook at the timeframes for this process, but the ACDP, having said that, will support this budget vote, will support this BBR process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, honorable member. The IFP.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. In accordance with goals as enumerated in the National Development Plan, this department has the responsibility of ensuring that our communities are safe, corruption is effectively sanctioned and prosecuted, judicial government is strengthened, and rule of law is maintained and upheld. Corruption being endemic in many of our public service departments must be rooted out, and in order to do this, effective legislation, including criminal sanctions for transgression thereof, must be in place. We are yet to see a stemming of the tide of corruption within public services and departments. When is the line in the sand going to be drawn, Honorable Minister? When will corruption find zero tolerance within our legislative frameworks and criminal sanction judgments? Nation building and social cohesion is foundational upon the ideals and values as entrenched in our Constitution. And as such, the supremacy of the Constitution must be guarded against those elements who would seek to undermine it for short-term political gains. Regarding the jurisdictional competences of our High Court, there remains a clear need for reform and, in fact, an express constitutional duty to do so. Financial provision must be made for this process. Court facilities in and around the country remain in a poor state of disrepair. These must receive immediate allocation and repair. The IFP supports the report. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Mocheka.
House Chairperson, the committee is happy with the progress being made by the ministry with regard to the introduction of the creation of the Office of the Chief Justice. We also observe that the attention given to accused persons is not balanced with the attention to the victims of crime. And that creates the impression that the law favors the criminals and not the victims of crime. And that matter is being addressed because it's a matter of interpretation and application of the Constitution. And with regard to the interaction between Parliament and the Chapter 9 institution, the Office of the Speaker has started that process. It's going on very well. With regard to the briefs, Honorable Schwartz is right that the majority of the briefs go to black, 76% goes to black lawyers, but that matter is also being addressed in regard to the implementation of the legal practice bill, which is also going on very well. So we are happy with the transformative agenda led by the ministry, and would like to encourage them to continue the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Members, I put the question again. Are there any objections to the report being adopted?
Chair, I don't know what is common between me and Honourable Mocheka, but I, on behalf of the EFF, reject the report.
The objection of the EFF is noted, and the report is thus adopted. Honourable Members, I will now suspend proceedings until 2 o'clock this afternoon, and wish to remind members that notices of motion, motions without notice, and member statements will be taken this afternoon. Business is suspended.